welcome to our deep dive into happiness. Like seriously, into the stuff that makes us tick.
Yeah.
You've sent in some super interesting stuff, especially the Dalai Lama's book, The Art of Happiness. Seems like you're ready to go beyond those, like, surface level tips, right?
Yeah, and with the Dalai Lama, we're not messing around. This is going to get deep. I mean, we've got science and philosophy all tangled up together, but don't worry, we'll pull out those nuggets you can actually use.
Okay, so the book jumps right in and says happiness. Like, real happiness is the whole point of life, not just, like, a bonus. It's the main event.
Right, and I think that's a really important point to start with because so often we hear that happiness is fleeting, or even selfish.
Yeah, like, don't be too happy, someone might get jealous.
Exactly. But this book is saying, no, go for it. Actually, it goes a step further and says that, get this, happy people are more likely to be the good guys. Compassionate, generous, the kind of people you want to hang out with.
So it's not just, like, feeling good in your bubble.
Yeah.
It actually makes you a better person.
That's what the research suggests. It's like that whole ripple effect thing, right? Happiness spreads outwards.
Okay, I'm liking this already. So more good vibes, more good deeds. But then there's that whole, like, nature versus nurture debate. If happiness is a skill, how much control do we actually have? I mean, we've all heard, happiness is an inside job.
Right.
But then science throws this genetic set point thing at us.
Yeah.
Like, our brains are kind of pre-programmed with a certain level of happy, and we're, like, stuck with it.
It's a bit of a bummer, right? You're like, oh, great, so I'm just destined to be a grumpy Gus. Yeah, exactly.
But here's the thing. This book, it was written before all this amazing research came out about neuroplasticity, which basically means our brains are way more adaptable than we thought.
So we're not just stuck with our, DNA blueprint. Not at all. Think of your brain like a muscle,
Yeah.
The more you use it in a certain way, the stronger those pathways get. Like, take meditation, for instance. There's actual proof that it can, physically increase the gray matter in the parts of your brain that handle happiness, compassion, all that good stuff.
Wow. So it's like literally giving your brain a happiness workout.
Exactly. So even if you weren't born with, a naturally sunny disposition, you can actually rewire your brain for happiness.
Okay, sign me up. But where do we even begin? Is there, a secret formula?
Well, the Dalai Lama, he says there's no magic bullet. Instead, he lays out these 3 core steps. It's like learning, conviction, and then effort. Think of it like building a house. You got your blueprint, then you got to believe you can actually build the thing, and then, it's time to get those hands dirty.
No shortcuts. Got it.
Yeah.
But I got to say, sometimes it feels like life throws a wrench in the whole construction project. You think you're making progress, and bam, something happens, you're back to square one.
Oh, absolutely. And the book, it gets real about that. Suffering is part of the deal, It doesn't try to sugarcoat it.
Okay, so what's the Dalai Lama's take on, dealing with the tough stuff?
Well, it's not about avoiding suffering. It's about how we relate to it. There's this really powerful story in the book about this woman, Kisagatami. She loses her child, right? And she's completely devastated. So she goes on this desperate search for, a miracle cure, anything to bring her kid back. And she ends up meeting the Buddha.
Okay, this is where it gets good.
The Buddha gives her this, impossible task.
Classic parable. Gotta love it.
Right. He tells her to go find a mustard seed from a house that has never, ever experienced death.
Whoa.
So she's going door to door, but of course she realizes death is a part of every single household. Every life.
Yeah, heavy stuff.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of beautiful, right? It's a reminder that we're not alone in our suffering.
Exactly. And that realization, even though it's painful, it leads her to a place of acceptance and peace.
Okay, but how do we actually, put this into practice? How do we move from that, aha moment to actually changing how we experience the hard stuff?
Well, that's where things get really practical. The book talks about taking responsibility, not playing the victim.
Easier said than done, though, right?
Yeah.
When someone cuts you off in traffic or your boss is being a total...
Oh, for sure. It's not like you're going to be all zen about every little annoyance. But the Dalai Lama, he's not saying we have to become doormats, Even he talks about his own struggles with anger and frustration. And remember, this is a guy who was forced to flee his own country.
Right.
Talk about stressful.
Yeah, definitely not living in some ivory tower.
No, not at all. And what he's saying is that, when we overreact to tough situations, we're just adding fuel to the fire.
Makes sense.
Instead, he encourages us to pause, analyze the situation, and choose a response that leads to, more peace, not more drama.
So it's about recognizing that we have a choice in how we respond. even when it feels like everything's hitting the fan.
Exactly. It's about that space between, something happening and our reaction to it.
I like that. Okay, so we've covered, like, happiness is a skill, this brain rewiring thing, compassion being key. What else is coming up in part 2 of our deep dive?
Well, now that we've laid the foundation, we're going to get even more practical. Tools, techniques, how to actually cultivate happiness, deal with those tough emotions, all that good stuff.
Sounds like a plan. Can't wait to dive back in.
Yeah.
Welcome back to our deep dive. So we've been digging into the Dalai Lama's take on happiness, and I gotta say, it's pretty refreshing. Like, it's not just about those fleeting feel-good moments, right?
No, not at all. It's way deeper than that. It's about cultivating those qualities, like kindness and compassion that actually spread outwards.
Right. It's like happiness with a purpose.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, what's been standing out to you so far? Like, what's hitting home in your own, like, happiness journey?
It's fascinating how the Dalai Lama brings together this ancient wisdom with, actual scientific insights. He's not just, throwing out feel-good phrases. He's got a whole system, a way of looking at well-being that's grounded in, his personal experience and research.
Right. It's like, hey, don't just take my word for it. Look at the science.
Yeah.
And one of the things that keeps coming up is this idea of what he calls basic spiritual values.
Yeah.
Not in a religious way necessarily, but just like basic human goodness, kindness, compassion, generosity, patience, all that good stuff.
It's like he's saying that these qualities, they're the foundation for a truly meaningful life.
Right. Like, you don't need a rule book to be a good human.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you find that, like, spiritual connection in a church, on a meditation cushion, or just out in nature. Those qualities, they're universal.
Yeah. And he makes a really interesting point about what happens when we don't cultivate those values. He says, life becomes, and I'm quoting here, hard, very dry. It's like we're missing that essential nourishment,
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Like, when I'm stuck in that, like, me mindset, everything feels kind of bleak. Like, what's the point,
He's saying those basic spiritual values are what give our lives direction, like a compass pointing us toward a life that's actually fulfilling.
But here's the thing, right? It's easy to, like, nod your head and say, yeah, kindness, compassion, got it. But actually living it, that's a whole other story. Like, how do you do that when you're juggling work, kids, life,
That's where the rubber meets the road. And the Dalai Lama, he acknowledges that. It's not always easy, but he keeps emphasizing this idea of practice, like making that conscious effort to bring those values into, everyday life.
So what does that look like? Any, like, practical tips?
Well, he talks about the importance of mindfulness, paying attention to your thoughts, emotions, sensations, without judgment. It's like hitting pause on that autopilot, becoming more aware of what's happening inside and out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
create that space between, stimulus and reaction.
Exactly. And then he talks about meditation, taking time to quiet the mind, connect with that deeper sense of peace that's always there, even when things are crazy.
I've been trying that lately. Even just a few minutes of, like, focused breathing can really shift things.
It's amazing how powerful those simple practices can be. And the Dalai Lama points out that, this isn't just about feeling good. It's about transforming how we relate to the world around us.
So it's not just about being happy. It's about, like, doing good.
Exactly. He sees compassion as that foundation for ethical action, creating a more just and compassionate world. It's about recognizing that we're all connected, that our actions, they have this ripple effect.
I'm sensing a theme here. It's like happiness isn't just this solo mission. It's about how we connect with each other, with something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah. And I think that's where it gets really inspiring. But I also hear there's this feeling of like, whoa, where do I even start? The world's a mess. My life is a mess. How can I actually make a difference?
Yeah, like, do I have to become, like, a superhero to make a dent in all this?
Well, the Dalai Lama would say no. He's very real about the challenges out there. But he also points out that even small acts of kindness, they can ripple out.
Right. It's not about, like, saving the world in a single bound. It's about those everyday moments. A smile, a listening ear, a helping hand. Those things add up, right?
Absolutely. He talks about cultivating this gentle and skillful approach to life, like striving for positive change, but also accepting things as they are.
Right. Like, we can be warriors for good, but peaceful warriors.
Exactly. Fierce in our commitment, but also gentle and compassionate with ourselves and others.
I like that. Okay, so we've got this idea of practice, mindfulness, compassion, all these threads weaving together. But I think it's important to acknowledge that this is a journey, right? Not about reaching some like perfect state of bliss where we never feel anything bad again.
Oh, absolutely. And the Dalai Lama, he's clear about that. It's a lifelong thing, this happiness journey. There are going to be ups and downs, twists and turns. But the more we practice, the more skillful we become at navigating all that.
It's like learning to surf. You're going to wipe out sometimes, but you keep practicing. You get more confident riding those waves. And even when you fall, you get back up, paddle back out.
That's the beauty of it, right? It's not about perfection. It's about progress. Showing up with that curiosity, compassion, willingness to learn and grow.
So as we head into the final part of our deep dive, what's coming up for you? Like what feels particularly relevant in your own quest for happiness? What are you taking away from this part of the conversation?
What's really striking me is how interconnected it all is. It's not just about me being happy. It's about cultivating qualities that benefit everyone around me.
Yeah, like that Ubuntu philosophy. I am because we are.
Exactly. When you start living from that place of connection, everything shifts. You become more aware of how your actions impact others, more compassionate, more committed to creating a world where everyone can thrive.
I love that. Okay, I'm feeling inspired and ready for the final leg of this journey. What other treasures await us in part 3?
Well, we're going to get even more practical. Think of it like your happiness toolkit. We're diving into specific tools and techniques for dealing with stress, cultivating those positive emotions, and navigating all those curveballs that life throws our way.
Sounds good to me. I'm ready to add some new tools to my arsenal.
Welcome back to the deep dive. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty energized after exploring the Dalai Lama's perspective. It's like happiness isn't just this fluffy, feel-good thing. It's about, making the world a better place.
Yeah, it's a beautiful vision.
Yeah.
But putting those ideals into practice, that can be tough. Life gets in the way, right? For sure. Like it's so easy to get caught up in anger, anxiety, self-doubt, all that stuff. So for this final part of our deep dive, let's get into those practical tools, the ones the Dalai Lama gives us for actually overcoming those obstacles.
Yeah, he really gets down to business in this part of the book, like anger, for instance. He talks about how destructive it can be, for ourselves and others. But he doesn't just say, don't be angry. He actually gives you a step-by-step approach for dealing with it.
Okay, so break it down for us. What's step 1? Because sometimes, those anger buttons get pushed and it's like instant reaction.
He says the first thing is to just pause, take a breath, analyze the situation. Like, what actually triggered the anger? Is it justified? Is it helpful? Often, just taking that moment to step back, it can help you diffuse it before it blows up.
Right, like hit that pause button on autopilot.
Exactly. And then, he says, start cultivating the antidotes to anger. Patience, tolerance. He even has this specific meditation technique for patience where you, visualize yourself in a frustrating situation and consciously choose a calm response.
It's like mental rehearsal for real life. The more you practice it in your mind, the more likely you are to do it when things get real.
Yeah.
Okay, so anger, check. What about anxiety? I feel like everyone's dealing with this constant low-level hum of worry these days.
The Dalai Lama, he gets it. He actually shares this funny anecdote about feeling nervous before meeting Chairman Mao. Even spiritual masters get the jitters. But he's saying we don't have to let anxiety run the show.
Okay, that's good to know. Because sometimes it feels like anxiety is just part of who I am.
He would say you're not defined by those anxious thoughts. Instead, he suggests shifting your focus. Instead of dwelling on your own fears and insecurities, connect with a greater sense of purpose. He talks about how he reminds himself that his primary goal is to help others, not to worry about, what people think of him.
It's like taking the spotlight off yourself and putting it on something bigger.
Exactly. It frees you up to show up with more courage, more authenticity, because you're not so caught up in your own head. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about self-esteem. How do we cultivate that healthy sense of self-worth without, becoming arrogant or constantly comparing ourselves to others?
Yeah, it's like walking a tightrope. You don't want to be all puffed up, but you also don't want to be constantly putting yourself down.
Right. Well, the Dalai Lama's approach is really simple. He says, focus on your strengths, your accomplishments. Don't dwell on the weaknesses or the past mistakes. He uses this analogy of pull out the arrow.
I love that. Instead of getting stuck in those negative thought loops, you shift your attention to what's going well.
Exactly. Genuine self-confidence, it doesn't come from seeking validation or comparing yourself to others. It comes from that deep inner knowing that you are worthy, just as you are.
We all have that inner reservoir of strength, but sometimes we forget it's there.
Right, and we all have unique gifts to offer. When you focus on developing those gifts and using them to make a positive impact, your self-esteem, it just naturally grows.
It's like bloom where you're planted,
Hey.
right? We've all got something special to offer. And when we embrace that, we not only feel better about ourselves, but we also make the world a little brighter.
I love that. You know, as we've been talking about all these tools and techniques, it's really striking me how interconnected it all is. It's not about just applying a specific technique for a specific problem. It's about like cultivating a way of being, one that's grounded in awareness, compassion, and wisdom.
Yeah, it's like weaving a tapestry. Each of these practices is a thread, and when you weave them together, you create this stronger, more resilient fabric for your life.
Yeah.
But it's a process, right? It's not like you reach this perfect state of happiness and then you're done.
Oh, for sure. The Dalai Lama is very clear about that. Cultivating happiness, it's a lifelong journey, not a destination. There are going to be bumps along the way, challenges, difficult emotions. But the more we practice these principles, the more skillfully we'll be able to navigate all that.
It's like learning to surf. Sometimes you wipe out,
Yeah.
but you keep practicing, you get better at riding those waves, and even when you fall, you just get back up, paddle back out.
That's the beauty of it, right? It's not about perfection. It's about progress. It's about showing up with curiosity, compassion, and a willingness to keep learning.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the art of happiness. It's been amazing exploring these ideas with you. Hopefully you've found some nuggets of wisdom that resonate and you're feeling inspired to keep exploring these practices in your own life.
It's been a joy sharing this journey with you. And remember, it doesn't end here. There's so much wisdom out there waiting to be discovered.
So keep those hearts and minds open. Keep seeking wisdom, keep practicing kindness, and keep spreading those good vibes. We'll see you back here soon for another deep dive into the fascinating world of ideas.